Hey, good morning. It's Julie here. And this is our online session, which I would normally do face to face with lots of kind of interactive exercises with you. But obviously we can't because we're at distance. So I've put some kind of thinking exercises in, which means that you'll have to stop the recording and kind of step away and do them and come back to it. Or you can watch the recording all the way through and then come back to the thinking exercises. So we're aiming for about an hour. Let's see how that goes. And I'm going to start screen sharing now, so that you can hopefully see my PowerPoint. Okay, so this is an introduction to transactional analysis that we're going to be doing, obviously, as part of your teacher training for the Marches Academy Trust. So what is transactional analysis? Transactional analysis was started by a guy called Eric Berne. He was familiar with the work of Freud, and he was really kind of interested in how to help people change, but he felt that Freud's work took too long and was too onerous and most people couldn't be doing with it. And so he worked with people in the military and started to notice certain patterns that kind of linked in. And from that, he developed this system called transactional analysis, which is used in therapy. So it's quite useful. I use it to work with coaching clients, but also organizations use it to understand what's happening there. So I am going to be applying this specifically to teaching, but obviously it will make sense to your kind of personal relationships and your friendships. And if I think there's a way to link into that, then I will. So moving on. I'm going to go to here. Okay. So transactional analysis says that there's three hungers that we all have, and those hungers are for recognition, structure, and stimulus. So if I talk them through, and that's what I'm going to try and meet in this session. Obviously, it's much harder virtually, and you'll see why. So recognition is a sense of I'm being seen, I'm being heard. People know who I am around here and know kind of what I'm good at, what I'm like, that sort of stuff. Now you can see why for lots of people work is such an important place if you've been going into work during the pandemic, because you've been getting your recognition from there. So I'm recording this in my office surrounded by books. There are other people in my house, but obviously recognition's much less for those people working at home, or if you've been doing your online learning, you'll know that that feels very different from if you're interacting with people. So it may be that your kind of need for recognition at the moment is quite low, but also it's possible to be with people and not feel like they really know us. And so recognition is about being seen and being known, and we kind of hunger for that. Structure, again, maybe if you think back to lockdown from March till June, maybe the structure of your life kind of changed completely. Overnight, I moved from working in schools to working online. So there were none of the bells, none of the normal structures. Those of you in schools, you'll be, you've got maybe staggered breaks, staggered lunch times, which means that everybody's sense of structure has really changed. So for the children, for the staff, and that can be quite a difficult thing because we need structure. And stimulus, we need to be interested. We need to feel like we're interested and engaged. So what I'm going to do is take us through. There's transactional analysis has got huge kind of body of work behind it. I'm going to pick out things that I think are most immediately useful for you in schools at the moment. So behind this approach are these three core beliefs. You might have heard of the book I'm Okay, You're Okay, and that was written by Eric Berne. And from that, so it was kind of written in the 60s to appeal to a wide audience, which is why the language of this is kind of very simple. Everyone is okay is a core belief. And what that means is that everyone, if you think, for me, the easiest way to think about this is that when we were all born the same. And no child is born evil, no child in this belief and my beliefs is born bad. So that's the fundamental bit of this, is that everyone is born okay. Of course, that doesn't mean that people don't do bad things. but this, I suppose, system of belief links into the next 2 points, that everyone can think and everyone can change. So that this way of thinking is that if people do bad things, so that kid in the class that's really irritating, then they're doing that because it's a learned adaptive behavior to get needs met. And we'll kind of cycle back to that during this session, and that it's the best way they know how to get those needs met. And if they could get the needs met in any other way, they would do it. And so the idea behind transactional analysis is that if we think about things, if we notice things that we're doing, then we have the capacity to change, which obviously is kind of part of what the restorative justice stuff is about, giving people options, giving people choices. Now, I can't work with the children. I'm working with you, the adults. And of course, if we change ourselves, then people change in response to us. So I want you to be, as we go through this course, be thinking in 2 levels, not only what am I thinking and what can I change, but then also we'll kind of link it into maybe particular students or situations that you're having. Now, of course, again, people argue that not everybody can think. So someone with severe Alzheimer's or dementia, you might argue, has a different capacity to think, or people that are on a mental health section 3, where their rights are taken away. So there's obviously caveats to here. And of course, the idea that everyone can change doesn't mean that everybody wants to change, but we're working with our capacity to change. So there's Eric Burns' name, if you're interested. So I'm okay, you're okay. And the games people play are the really kind of famous books. They're quite easy to read. They're quite kind of pop fiction-y. But for me, the books that I find the most useful, so if you like what I'm saying today and want to know more, then this would be my go-to book. Obviously, I'm going to be using some YouTube clips as well in the PowerPoint slide, so you can access those too. But TA Today by Stewart and Joins has got really, really simple ways of explaining the whole kind of body of work. It's probably a bit out of date now. It was written in the 80s. Transactional analysis is a continually evolving school of thinking, so with its own journals and its own research. So if you, again, I would start here, and then if you want to know more, kind of move on from there. So this is one where we're going to go into an exercise. So what I want you to do is maybe press pause on the video, grab a piece of paper, and then draw this on your piece of paper. So I would do it A4 and kind of across the page. Okay. And so then what I'm going to do is bring up the next slide, and it's going to, so obviously you've got the line in front of you now, hopefully, and you're going to kind of put people on that line. So how do you feel about people who push in? So you're going to put them, you know, you can put a dot on the line for whether they're, that's fine, I love people who push in, they're really assertive and confident, or you might want to put a dot on that line for I hate it, it's really rude, somewhere on that spectrum. If we were doing this face-to-face, we'd be doing this kind of obviously in discussion. So if you are in a room with someone, you might want to put the things on the line and then have a chat to each other about why have you put it there? What's your thinking behind it? Okay, next one. How do you feel about people who drive fast? So just go for a spontaneous dot on that line. If you're with someone, then have a chat about why your dots are there. And you're not trying to convince each other about why you're right and they're wrong. You're just interested and you're having a discussion. So you might be using phrases like, tell me about why you've put that there. And it might be that you go, yeah, driving fast is, you know, it's skillful. It means you get places faster. Or you might be down the other end saying it's absolutely unsafe. And you might be in the middle saying, well, you know, it depends on the situation. So have a think. Okay, how do you feel about people who smoke? And again, have a think. So press the video at any time you want more time. How you feel about people who smoke, and justify that to yourself or have a chat to someone. Just be curious. We're trying to approach this with an attitude of curiosity. And here's one for teachers. How do you feel about teachers who don't mark work on time? Now, obviously, COVID's kind of changed this a bit because we're marking differently. So if you need to think about who don't mark work full stop, or change the question so it suits you. And again, have a think about why it's there. And shout at pupils. So how do you feel about teachers that shout at pupils? How do you feel about, if you haven't seen it in school, then you might want to think about how you feel when you see adults shouting at kids outside the supermarket. It's always a good place for that, or again, used to be pre-COVID. What's your response? So again, is that fine? Young people, you put them at the positive end. People need to shout at young people so they have some respect and they know where they stand, or you might be down the other end saying, no, that's outrageously bad. But again, just put them there with that attitude of curiosity. And then smack their children. So obviously, as teachers, this is not something we can do, or classroom assistants, or anyone in education, but clearly it's something that some children experience from adults. So where would you put those people on that line? Okay, so if we were together, I'd be saying, what do we learn from this exercise now? What does the exercise itself give you an opportunity to do? And if we were in discussion, usually what most people say is it's a good way to explore how everyone has different points of view. People have their own rationality for it, that we all have different perspectives. It's also quite an interesting way to kind of weigh into exploring prejudice, because I could have put on there, how do you feel about women? How do you feel about men, gays, whatever. So it's a way of starting to have that discussion. Might be a PS itchy task, but also that kind of putting marks on a positive negative line is quite a good way of, how do you feel about this task, or how do you feel about homework? So it's an instant visual way of gauging people's reactions. So the tool itself is useful as well as the kind of content. Now we're going to draw another line like this, and you'll notice though that the title is slightly different, about how do I feel? So, or how do you feel? I'm talking to you. How do I feel? You're going to be reflecting on yourself here. So again, if you need to press pause to do that, then do. Okay. So how do you feel when you've done some exercise? So you might be right up on the positive, yeah, feel great, really energized, really feel good about myself. Or you might be right down at the bottom, oh, I hate it, makes me miserable, makes me realize how unfit I am. So again, just a dot on the line. And if you're with someone, have a discussion about why that is. But you're having the discussion with curiosity. So tell me about that. I'm interested in. Tell me more about that. Those kind of sentence starters. And those sentence starters are also really interesting when working with children. Tell me about what happens at break time. Tell me more about that. I'm interested in, because it takes away all the kind of accusation. Okay, here's another one. How do you feel about yourself when you've had a lie-in? So it might be brilliant, I feel fabulous, never felt better. Or it might be, oh God, I hate it. I feel like I've wasted the day. So just a spontaneous dot on the line. And then the conversation, if you're with someone, or the conversation with yourself about why is that? When you've eaten too much, now obviously too much is personal, but dot on the line, and a consideration or a conversation of why that is. And you might be thinking physically, you might be thinking psychologically. When you meet someone you find attractive, that thing where you see someone and you get that churny feeling in your stomach, does that make you feel good? What does that do to you? And then be curious about kind of that response. And if you're with someone and talking to them, be curious about their response and why. And really listen to each other if you are able to do this with someone near you. When you shout at someone, so it may be that you're kind of watching this going, I've never shouted at anyone in my life, in which case skip this one. But I'm assuming most of us have shouted at someone. So how does it make you feel about yourself? Okay. And why, how? Be curious if you're talking to somebody else. Okay, now again, this is a quick exercise. So if we were together, we'd be talking about, well, what's this exercise useful for? Of course, what it very quickly gets you to do again is different perspectives, how we can't make assumptions about people. So, you know, if you say to me, I've eaten too much, then I might make an assumption that you feel bad about that, but you might feel great about that. So we have to be careful about making assumptions about each other's experience. But also, of course, it's a very quick way. You might use it for PSHE about, you know, kind of, you can build this up. So how do you feel when you can't sleep at night? How do you feel when your you know, friends go to a party and don't invite you? And it's quite a good way of getting into kind of deep and complicated feelings. So kind of, I also need to put a kind of health warning around that, because you may not be the best person to deal with that. You always have to put the child protection piece in there about not promising confidentiality. And ideally, you would want to signpost them on to someone who can work with that stuff. Now, all of these are building up. So these are my exercises, but this model from transactional analysis is called Life Positions and Windows on the World. And basically, it's acknowledging that, as you can see down the bottom, these are ways we tend to see the world and others, and they change from moment to moment, but they can also change across our life. And the idea of them being like windows on the world is that I kind of like the metaphor of them being different pairs of glasses that we can put on and take off. And that's going back to the fact that transactional analysis is something that we can make choices about. So if I run through this, and then we'll kind of, again, play around with it. And if we were in the room, we'd be doing it collectively, we'd be doing it together. So the top left, I'm okay, you're okay. You can see that I plus, Y plus. So that's just an abbreviation of I'm okay, you're okay. So in this position, it means I can get on with things, you know, COVID. So I'm okay, you might be feeling with COVID. You know, I'm going to make sure that you're okay by keeping my distance, but I'm kind of going to assume that if we keep our distance and wear a mask, etc., it's going to be okay. So it's a getting on with the situation way of looking at it. Top right, as I'm looking at the screen, I'm okay, you're not okay. You can see here it's got a plus minus down below it, and this comes with behaviors like judgment. So when we go into criticism or judgment, it's because I know better than you, so I can tell you did that right, you did that wrong, you did that wrong, why are you wearing that, why do you look like this? So you can hear that it's got that element of one-upmanship. Okay. And bragging fits in here. Oh yeah, well my car is, or you know, oh I've just got promoted too. And it's, you can see when I'm doing it, if you're watching kind of me as well as it, you can see it's kind of, we tend to puff ourselves up when we're in this position. You might see people using these kind of hand gestures where you're steepling your fingers. Sentences like, well of course you know that, is really one of these, because it's kind of, it makes you feel so stupid when you don't know it then. And so the intention here is for the speaker or the person who's in this position to kind of make themselves look better for all sorts of reasons. And we all do, remember that we all do all of these to some extent. Okay, but as I'm going through it, start to just notice, oh yeah, that's more me, or I know I do a bit of that. Okay, bottom left. Actually, no, we won't do that one. We'll come back to bottom right. So I'm not okay, you're okay. So this is the I minus Y plus. So this is where I think everyone else is better than me. So this is where we walk into a classroom and we think, you know, you're watching the other colleague teaching and you think, oh, I'm never going to be able to do that. I'm never going to be able to do this. Or you're in the WhatsApp group thinking, oh, everybody's doing better than me, or everyone did better at their essays than me, or everyone's doing more lessons than me, or everyone's getting better feedback than me. And you know, and sometimes that's true. People might be doing more lessons than you. But the interesting thing about these positions is that they tend to show up even when things are not true. So Instagram and Facebook and all those things are brilliant for kind of increasing this sense of I'm not okay, everyone else, because Instagram kind of focuses on me putting my best photos up. So I'm okay. Look how amazing I am. So that's top right. I'm okay. You know, nobody looks as fabulous as I do doing yoga. Which then has the effect of you're the one scrolling through those really bendy lycra clad yoga pictures, and it's like, oh, I can't ever do that. So then we're into I'm not okay, you're okay. So you can see the relationship between those two. And so that's a one where we feel like it's our fault, we're not good enough. And you can start here as I talk about these, that these are often linked to kind of early childhood messages, which we're kind of not going to go in. A transactional analysis does look at what they call early childhood scripting and kind of how our upbringing, parental influences can give us scripts that are unhelpful to us. But first of all, that gets quite deep and heavy and isn't you know, I wouldn't, if I was doing that, I'd want to do it face to face with you. But also it's kind of, it's hard to be using that sort of stuff in school because you can't get that deep with students. But what you can do is kind of play around with this, and I'll show you how. So the bottom left square, I'm not okay, you're not okay, is really the kind of very difficult place to be. And again, we'll all have had times when we felt like, I can't do it, no one can help me, and the world is an awful place. So this tends to be what we call the kind of depressive position, because we've basically, I've given up on myself, I've given up on you and the world and my future. I can't see any way forward. Okay, so again, I'm going to suggest that you press pause and draw this for yourself on a sheet of paper. So do press pause, and then I'm going to carry on. Okay, so hopefully you've got that grid drawn out on a piece of paper. And again, we're going to use the dot principle here. And you're going to put a dot on that grid for where are you on your birthday. So you might be in the plus square, which is like, yeah, it's great, you know, I like my birthdays, I like how other people deal with my birthday, I really appreciate kind of whatever it is that people do for me, that's fine. So that might be a plus. A plus minus, so I'm okay, you're not okay, might be arrogant. Oh, my birthday's fabulous and we did all this amazing stuff and it was just, you should have seen it. Or it might be judgment. Well, why didn't they do this for me? I always buy them better presents. So it might be judgment and criticism. It might be that I'm not okay, which is, oh, birthdays, I don't really like to tell anyone, no one will mind, you know, I'm not important enough. You know, everyone's got more interesting and useful things to be doing. And then the minus position might be something like, oh, birthdays, I hate them, nobody remembers, everybody's awful, what's the point, I'm just getting older. Okay, so hopefully by now you've put your dot on the thing. We're going to move on to the next one and then we'll reflect at the end. So in a traffic jam, so imagine this isn't just any old traffic jam, this is a traffic jam where you've really, oh, I'll just take them off, you've really got to get to a job interview, and you know it's critical that you get there on time, and you're in a traffic jam. So do you you know, first of all, you put your dot where you think you are. And then if I talk those through, so plus might be, well, you know, I'm okay. There's nothing I can do here apart from sit safe in this traffic jam. I will just call ahead, let them know I'm going to be late, and que sera, you know, that's life. Or you might be in the plus minus, so arrogant or judgmental, which is like, why have they got roadworks now? Why has this silly idiot had a crash? Why were they driving too fast? Why doesn't everybody else just move out of my way? So that might be that position. Or you might be in minus plus, which is, oh, it's all my fault, I should have left earlier, I should have read the traffic alerts, I should have known, I'm never going to get this job, everybody else is going to get it, and so on. And then the minus is, I knew this was never going to work, I'm rubbish, you know, this always happens to me, it's all desperate. And so you can start to see that as we shift around these life positions, there's there's some that are going to be more useful to us, because clearly the person who has the plus plus attitude of, well, I did what I can, here I am, I'll phone ahead, they'll understand. They're going to arrive at that interview much more relaxed than the person who thinks that it's all awful. Or indeed the person who thinks it's everybody else's fault, because they're going to be so irate. Okay. So where are you when you get up on the first day back at school after the summer holidays? Now, you haven't had this yet, but you have had half term and you have had breaks from school. So how does that feel? So is it put a dot in your square and then I'll continue? But you might be, yeah, I can't wait to get on with this. I'm looking forward to getting on with people, plus, plus. Or you might be, right, I'm going to show year 9 who's boss. And that might be plus, minus. And then you might be minus, plus. Oh, God, I hate it. I can't do it. Everyone else has got it better than me. So that would be minus, plus. Or it might be, what is the point? I'm rubbish at it. I hate the job. It's all awful. What am I doing here? Okay. Next one. Okay, so you're just about to go into that class or a meeting with somebody that makes you feel it's a really difficult meeting or a really difficult class. Where would you be? So put a dot in that square. Okay. And of course, what you're going to do is, so you might be plus plus, that's fine. You probably wouldn't even be using the word difficult. You might be, I've got some skills. I'm going to assume that they're doing the best they can. We'll just get on with it. Whereas plus minus would be, I'll show them. I don't deserve to be treated like this. They should respect me. Whereas minus plus might be, oh, I can't do this, it's awful, it's just, they're going to rip me to bits. And minus would be, what's the point? I can't do this, giving up. Okay, so the questions that I have for you are, first of all, when you look at where your dots are, do you notice any patterns? Now, again, it's kind of harder to do when we're not face to face, but you might, for example, notice that you've got a couple in the same square. And it's just something to be curious about, because my experience for myself, but also working with clients over the years and with groups of kids, is that we really do have a particular window that we like to see the world through. And Rob Collier, who you might know, seems to spend a lot of time in the plus plus position. And when I've asked him about what that is, we've had discussions about, is it nature, is it nurture, who knows? But all of this, remember, transactional analysis comes from the view that everyone can think and everyone can change. So it's all about just spotting patterns for yourself and being able to change them. So if you think, oh, I quite often go to, I'm not okay, everyone else is better than me, then it's just one of those things that you can go, oh, that's curious. That's interesting. And then you go into the world and you look out for when you're doing that. And of course, with all of it is, once you've got an awareness, you can say, well, is it true? Is it true that everyone's going to have a better Christmas than me? And, the answer is, of course, is usually, no, it's not true that everybody is. And what does better mean? And those sorts of things. You'll also have started to notice right back at the beginning that the plus minus and the minus plus are linked. So if somebody is being all puffed up and showing off, it can very often make you feel like you're minus plus, I'm not good enough. Okay, but also we internally do weird stuff ourselves. So we might be not feeling very good about ourselves, so we might be a minus plus, so I don't feel good enough around here. And so as a kind of protective mask, we make somebody else feel bad by being plus minus. So let me give you an example of that. So when my kids were little, if I was kind of stressed and feeling like I wasn't coping, for those of you that have had kids, I'm sure there's been moments where you can go to just those moments where you just think, oh my God, I've got too much to do, I can't do it, we're going to be late. And so what you do is I shouted, which was me puffing up, being plus, and then kind of making the kids feel minus. But of course, what happens then, so in that moment when I'm shouting, I've switched from minus plus to plus minus. But of course, what very quickly happens is that I end up going, oh my God, I'm an awful mother, back into minus plus, which reinforces it. So it's just being curious about those models. The other thing to notice is that it's very rare for someone to be plus plus all the time. And it's practice. It's a practice to start to think about how, once we've spotted our less helpful patterns, like the minus plus or the plus minus, then we can start to think about, okay, how can I think about this differently? Someone who, again, we've all had moments probably where we've been minus minus, where we felt hopeless and helpless and very, very dark. Obviously, if someone is stuck there for a long time, whether that's you or a kid in your class, then that is kind of cause for concern and maybe conversations here. So someone who is depressed would be in minus minus. Now, if you've got someone in your class and if you know kids well enough, you might be able to bring one to mind who spends a lot of time in minus minus. It's going to be too big an ask to get them to go to plus plus. It's just too big. So I know it sounds weird, but if they suddenly go from minus minus where everything is awful and then they start judging or criticizing, then actually that's a shift, because at least there's the sense of ego there. I'm okay even if they're putting someone else down. Now I know it's not a behavior you want to encourage, but it is sign of movement, and that's what this whole kind of model is about, is our ability to move. So so obviously you can see what it means for you, but what does it mean in a class? So if you're in a class, I'm really aware of my long A sounds here, class. My kids would laugh at me, but I'm going to go back to class because I grew up in the South. So if you're in a classroom and you go in with oh, I can't do this, it's awful, then you're kind of inviting people to go, oh yeah, she thinks she's no good at this, or he thinks. So it's just being aware of how, if just because we're feeling like we can't do it, that's just a window. It's just a pair of glasses that we've put on, that we're looking through, that very often is a habitual, inherited pair of glasses. And actually we can take them off and we can look at things a different way. So it's all about kind of mental and emotional agility. Okay. So let's just hover over that second question. And again, you might want to press pause and think about what you need to do to keep in plus plus. So the times when you feel okay, just have a time, think about the time in your life where you think, actually, I felt okay then. Why? What was that? So for me, that's simple things like I've slept enough and I haven't got too much to do and I've had some time to look after myself and I've eaten some good food and I've got some fresh air and I've got people to talk to. So what other things, just press pause now and make a list of the things that you know you need to help you be in plus plus as often as possible. Okay, and when you've done that, then actually make an action plan, especially as we're going in, to teaching. We're always starting either a new term or a holiday. Just think about how you could tweak your habits. So there's no point saying, oh yeah, I'm going to go to the gym 5 nights a week, because that'll help, because that might be too unrealistic. But you might want to say, I'm going to go for a 10-minute walk after work every day. That might feel more achievable. So looking at the things that you know you need to do, to move you more into plus plus, and then actually putting together an action plan for that. So press pause, or we're going to move on. Okay, so if we were in the room, we would play a really silly game. And this is it's quite a good game. So I'm going to explain it to you in case you are in a room with somebody. But if you're not, I'll explain it in a different way. So, you know I don't know, you're probably too young, but there's a song called I've Got a Hole in My Bucket, Dear Liza, Dear Liza. And it's about how this guy wants to get the hole in his bucket fixed. So here is your bucket. You're going to be imagining that you had a partner, or you're going to find a partner and decide who's going to be A and B. And person A's got a hole in their bucket and asks B for help to fix it. So person A is going to start off by saying, I've got a hole in my bucket. Can you help me fix it? And B is going to say, yeah, you could. And so it doesn't have to be sensible. So it could be that you're going to mend the bucket with macrame. You're going to make one suggestion. And then person A is just going to say no. And then you might say, oh, so once you've said no, then person B comes back with another suggestion of, oh, you could stick chewing gum in the bottom. No, you could, yeah, use papier-mâché. No. So just, you would keep that going for a while and then start to debrief on it. You then switch roles. This time it's person B with a hole in the bucket. So they're going to start off by saying, I've got a hole in my bucket. Will you help me fix it? And person A is going to say, yeah, and try and help. But every time person A comes up with a suggestion, person B is going to meet it with a yes, but. So person A might have said mend it with macrame, and person B is going to say, yeah, but rope will go soggy. And then person A will say, oh, mend it with papier-mâché, and person B will say, yeah, but I haven't got any of that glue you need for papier-mâché. And you keep going. Okay. And then at the end of that, you think, oh, how did that feel? And how does that compare to no? Because very few people will actually say no. And if you think about kind of the world's stroppiest kids, sometimes they will say no outright and dig their heels in. But more often than not, they will say, yes, but it wasn't my fault. Yes, but you didn't tell me. Yes, but I didn't know. Yes, but the cat fell off the roof. There'll be lots of yes, but. So I want you to just, again, if you're together or if you're on your own, just press pause and think, oh, what's the difference between a yes, but and a no? Okay. So in transactional analysis game terms, this is that when you say no, kind of people are very clear on where you are, but it can lead to a break in communication. Do you want to come out tonight? No. Where'd you go with that? If you say, do you want to go out tonight? And I go, yeah, but I haven't got any money. Then we are continuing the conversation. We're kind of hooked into that. Oh, well, I'll lend you some. Yeah, but I don't really like to borrow any. Yeah, but you can pay me back. Oh, I don't know when I'm going to get paid next. So you can see how the conversation continues, how there is maintained attention. But hopefully you can also see how that always ends badly. It's kind of irritating. And I'll kind of link that in to a model further on. Okay, so this is that model, the drama triangle. So the drama triangle, so that's a guy, Steve Cartman's model. So not Eric Berne, Steve Cartman came along later. That's a picture of Steve Cartman at the bottom there. And he, the games that people play are Eric Berne's games. And by games, he means that we all play psychological games in order to get attention. And what we most crave is authentic attention, which is where somebody, remember going back to that recognition, someone really recognizes us and sees us for who we are, not what we do, but just our value, our basic essential value as a human being. So we all crave that. But if we can't get that, we play games. And Cartman came along and looked at all the games that Eric Berne had written about, and he said, oh, you could sum up all those games in this model. And I love this model. I think this is one of the best ways for understanding everything from international war to kind of internal conflict within yourself. So these are roles, they're not actual situations. So the persecutor role, you can see, is that plus minus. I'm better than you, I'm judging, I'm nagging, I'm shouting, I'm feeling better than you, and I'm putting you down. Okay. I'll come back to the rescuer. The victim position, again, we've already looked at, is that depressive position of it's all hopeless and helpless and there's no point, and I've given up all my power. I just can't do anything about it. And then the rescuer position. So, and I think as teachers and educators, we have to be wary, because we often come into these professions because we we want to help and we want to make a difference from the world, all of which is fine, but it can mean that we get onto the drama triangle as rescuers. So rescuers sounds like it, we're the nice people, we're the people that kind of come in on our white horses to save the day. But actually, again, you'll see that it's a plus minus, because a rescuer assumes that only they can solve the problem. And so they disempower other people. So if I give you an example, so when my kids are much, much younger, the younger one would be playing with Lego and he'd be struggling with it. And then the elder son would come in, take the Lego off him, fix the problem, and then he wouldn't understand why my younger son would punch him. But that's classic rescuer stuff. So he moved in, took the Lego away, solved the problem without checking in with younger son. If he'd have said to younger son, I can help with that, do you want help? And if younger son had said, yeah, that'd be great, then that wouldn't be rescuing. But because he just assumed I can do this and he can't, he disempowered younger son, made himself feel good by being the one that could do Lego, and then got a thump. Now that's the thing with the drama triangle, I'll link it back to the bucket game in a minute, is that as soon as we're on the game, we're in the game, it always ends badly. So at the end of that little episode, the son that had tried to help with the Lego, eldest son, felt bad because he felt, well, I helped him and he's punched me. Youngest son felt bad because he was enjoying the challenge of doing the Lego and now it's fixed. So he feels bad. He's also just got into trouble for punching. But eldest son's also got into trouble for interfering, not into trouble. We had an adult discussion. It was a good day for me. But it often ends badly. So if you think about I've got a bucket with a hole in it, will you help me fix it? Hopefully you can see that that sentence is set up to be victimy. I can't fix it. So this is, I can't find a pencil, haven't got a book, I don't know how to. And the invitation, and it tends to notice I'm doing a kind of slightly whiny voice, and it often has a kind of slumped posture, kind of hip up, head over. And that's because I'm feeling a bit pathetic and frail. And it's an invitation for you to rescue me. So you give them a pencil. But then I can't find the right page. If it carries on, then you know, because then what starts to happen is that instead of being nice, kind, rescuing teacher, you start to think, oh, bloody hell, why hasn't he got organized? So then now you've switched to persecutor. And so now you're cross with the person and they're going to continue to feel like a victim. Or if you think about a kind of conflict situation where you've got two kids who are shouting at each other. So 1 minute they're feeling like the persecutor because they're shouting, but then the next minute they're getting shouted back at. So they're feeling like the victim. So they're rattling between persecutor and victim. And then you step in, and if you're not careful, you end up trying to be the rescuer, and then before you know it, they've turned on you, and then you feel like the victim, and it feels like they're persecuting you. So it always ends badly. And it's so what do we do about this? Well, it's best just to avoid it or to stop it and step away. And we'll kind of talk about how to do that in a minute. But if you think about how this works internationally, this is how conflict wars start. They've got weapons of mass destruction. We're going in to sort them out, etc. Or internally, we might have there's a massive great piece of chocolate cake and I've just eaten it, so we might go into victim. Oh, I'm awful, I shouldn't have eaten that chocolate. Or we might go, it's always awful, I always do it, it's always going to be terrible. Or we might go into persecutor of, well, you're so internally, I'm so fat, so stupid, so. Or I might go into, well, I deserved it, I've had such a hard day and nobody does what I do, I completely deserve that big piece of cake. So we can do it internally as well as externally. Hopefully that makes sense. So if we go back to the bucket game, and I've put a couple of YouTube clips below, but I'm going to leave those for you to find. So the bucket's got a hole in it and it needs fixing. And this time person A says, oh yeah, we could fix it with this. And then person B says, yes, and we could fix it with that. And then the next person A, yes, and. So if you're with someone, don't stop when the bucket is fixed, but just keep going. So if you want to press pause, if you're with someone, and do that. And now debrief on the energy. So yes, and tends to generate a lot of kind of laughter, a lot of energy, and a lot of fun, because obviously it's collaborative. You're kind of working together to solve the problem. So there's a couple of YouTube clips up there, should you want to watch them. And this is the winner's triangle. So AC Troy, there's her on the bottom, came along and was like, okay, so how do we help people get off the drama triangle? And she came up with the same letters, so P, R, and V, but she said this is the winner's triangle. So you'll notice that in the middle of the drama triangle, it's got the word discounting. And in transactional analysis terms, discounting means that we're not taking into account maybe our skills, their skills, the reality of the situation. We're somehow not seeing things as they really are. Whereas the winner's triangle has the word accounting, which means I'm going to take all things into account and make reasonable and rational decisions. Okay, so if we look at these, instead of being the persecutor, we're going to be potent or assertive. So this is where we're going to be able to state what I want. Powerful. This is not power over or control. This is feeling empowered to. So, you might feel empowered. So here's a victimy thing to do might be where you really want something. So let me just think about myself. So I might really want a particular book for Christmas. Now, a victimy way to deal with that would be to go, oh, I never get what I want for Christmas. No, I always get things I don't like. So that I'm giving up all my power, all my everything. Or I might slip into, well, they're rubbish. They never get me what they want. So judgment and blame. And that would be the persecutor. So if I were being potent and assertive, I'd simply ask, I'd say, is there anyone that would like to get me this book for Christmas? So that would be the potent assertive one. So in a situation where a child is going, I haven't got a pencil, then you might want to encourage them to claim their own potency and power. So you might say, I hear you haven't got a pencil, John. I'm happy to lend you one this lesson. How are you going to make sure you've got one next lesson? So that question means that you're not taking responsible, you're not rescuing because you're not taking responsibility for it, but you're empowering him to think about how to solve his own problems. So you're taking into account that he hasn't got one this lesson, but you're also taking into account that you want things to be different and you want him to take into account the fact that he needs to be more organized. Okay, so if we deal with it in that way as well, we're being responsive and caring, but we're not doing things for people that they could do for themselves. So, he's perfectly capable of getting himself a pen, or it may be that he can't because the money's short or whatever. And that might be your caring thing, that you catch him at the end of the lesson and say, John, what are the things that are stopping you getting a pencil? And he might just say, oh, it's really disorganized, sorry. Or he might say, we're really struggling for money, in which case you might then be responsible. So you might respond to that situation to say, John, would you like me to see? Should we go up to learning support? Should we see if we can get some financial support, if we can give you some pens and pencils? But all the time we're asking, we're not just piling on in there, because John might hate it. He might feel ashamed. He might feel doesn't want to be the victim. He might have another oh no, I've got a bit of work, or mum's got a bit of work, she said she's going to buy, mum's got some work, she's going to buy me this pencil. Imagine if we'd then piled in and given him them, and mum's so looking forward to buying it. So it's always asking. And then vulnerable this is a tough one, is to be noticing how you're feeling and what you need, but also maybe what they're feeling and what they need. So you might notice that when John's saying we haven't got enough money for a pencil, that you feel awful, that he's so financially strapped that he can't. And you might notice in yourself a kind of urge to be charitable and to share. But you notice that, and then you kind of think, is that what he needs? Does he need someone pitying him, someone giving him a charity, or does he need to feel empowered and have those choices? Okay. Now, of course, all of this is great, isn't it? Here I am standing in my office. Do I do this all the time? No. Does it take practice? Yes. It's just, we're all works in progress. Okay, so hopefully we've got that. So if you want to take a pause, you might want to do that here. we're now going to move on to functional fluency. So I actually know Susanna Temple, whose picture that is there. And this was only developed kind of 10, 15 years ago. And she very much uses it in business and in education. So her background herself is in teaching. So if you Google functionalfluency.com, you'll see all her materials there. If you like it, you can even become a facilitator. I think I did do some training with her at some point. And so all that's about to follow is kind of it's more recent transactional analysis, and it's built on ego state theory that Byrne came up with. But Susanna was really interested in making it very functional. So how can we use that information in our relationships? And she's also kind of developed a psychometric tool out of that. But of course, what we're looking for as teachers is how can I use this stuff? So her model kind of builds up. So this is her diagram, and I'm going to kind of show you how it builds up. She says we've got 3 categories, all human beings. And I was listening to someone on a podcast this morning that said great apes, pretty much the same as well. All human beings have these 3 categories of social functioning that we all have to have a sense of social responsibility. And so this is, unless we're teeny tiny young, we're involved in bringing other people up. So obviously that's as parents, as teachers, as TAs, anyone, social workers, even prison officers. We're helping people. We have a certain amount of authority in relation to some people, and it's our job to help people kind of do that well, to help people grow up well. So if you were a boss, if you're a team leader, then your job is to look after your team, to hold, to bring them on, to hold them to account, to develop them. The next category is about being able to assess the reality of the situation. So this is very much here and now functioning. So if I'm driving and a car pulls out in front of me, my brain is very quickly going to reality set, and I'm going to snap my brakes on in order to survive. So this one can't be kind of pre-planned, because it's how we respond in the moment, based on how we're seeing the situation. And then self-actualization. So the top one is our responsibility to others, and then this bottom one is our responsibility to ourselves. So as teachers, the classic thing is we don't eat properly during term time, don't get enough sleep, and so this would be saying, well, actually you need, in order to be self-actualizing, so that's a word from Maslow she's using there, the hierarchy of needs. So in order to be functioning socially, you need to also be looking after yourself. So that could be to do with creative expression. It could be being around people that kind of get you. It could just be energy, and it could be, so what do you do to develop yourself? So that's the first level of her model. So what you might want to do here is just press pause and think about, well, how is all that going? So I'm guessing that you're probably feeling like you're doing lots and lots of social responsibility stuff, and in the moment, you'll all have had to learn to adapt in the moment. You've got a great lesson plan, and then it goes out the window. That's the reality assessment. But I'm wondering about how you're looking after yourself and growing up yourself is going. So just press pause here and think about, okay, which of these needs a bit of attention, and how might I give myself what I need, in the weeks ahead? So you might want to just press pause there. Okay. And then she says that those kind of, so we've got the 3 elements still there. You can see the lines going across the page, but actually that they divide into different functions, 5 elements, she calls them. So there's the control elements. So if you think about your role as a teacher, so much of what you're doing is about control, guiding and directing others, and also yourself. So, so much of teaching is to do with that. But also, most people that come into teaching also want to do the care element of responding to other people's needs, looking after other people, although time for that is much more squished. So if you go down to the bottom, we'll come back to accounting, relating to, so this is you, we want to relate to and we want to be socialized. So this is getting on with others, making sure we're fitting in. This is, knowing not to burp and have your elbows on the table, that sort of thing. But the natural one is you being you. So there's always that little bit of tension, isn't there, about, I think Christmas is an interesting time for that, where there's you and what you would like to be, but then you've got to fit into kind of the social expectations and maybe your family's social norms. So there's often a tension there. And then the reality assessment is like keeping up to date. So just because Christmas was always done that way, we're in the COVID era now. Is this really what we're going to do for Christmas this year? Are we taking into account all factors? So just because we've always gone out and got drunk and we always have a house full, are we taking into account the fact that there's a virus with quite, that people are in hospitals, that hospitals are stretched? Are we taking into account that in 6 months time things will be passed? Are we taking into account the fact that we've got people with are we taking all that into account? Are we looking at all the facts of reality when we're decision making? Okay, so hopefully that bit makes sense. So when you think about this in school, obviously, as I've said, we probably spend a lot of time caring, some time controlling, probably quite a lot of time relating and getting along with others in a socialized way. You know what your role is as a teacher. So potentially the bits that get squished are your own self-expression, but also kind of the whole picture of reality, because it's so easy in school to kind of get stuck into the reality of your class or your school. And it kind of, I think reality is obviously in kind of different circles, isn't there? You might have a family reality that you've got somebody, you might go into school and your reality that day is that actually there's been a bit of a catastrophe at home. And unless you've taken account back to the winner's triangle and you know that you're feeling a bit wobbly and a bit vulnerable, then you might go into a classroom and behave in persecutory ways where you're shouting at the kids, which then kind of sets off a negative loop, because remember, once we're onto the drama triangle, it all goes badly. And then you come away from that lesson and you go, why did that happen? And often it's because we haven't taken account of everything that was happening. So just press pause there and reflect on something that hasn't gone well for you. So it could be an encounter with a member of staff, it could be a class, it could be a particular child, and just think, okay, what was I not taking into account about myself, the other person, and the situation within the class, within the school, within the wider world? What was I not taking into account which might have made a difference? So just press pause there. Okay. So then, welcome back. Susanna Temple then divides it a bit further. So remember, we've got the control on the left and the care on the right. So there's different types of control. There's ineffective guidance and directing, and effective. So ineffective is obviously when we're saying, year 8, put your pens down and listen, and they ignore you. And we've all had that experience. Effective is when they put the pens down and listen to you. And then ineffective looking after people is where you've got a best mate who phones up all the time and tells you about how awful she feels about getting drunk, and you're really sympathetic and empathetic, but she keeps on doing it. That's ineffective. Effective is maybe where you have a chat and go, listen, what are you doing? And she changes her behavior. That's effective. Okay, and then bottom up. So notice accounting can't be divided because it's always here and now. It's always going on now. So I'm taking into account the fact that I'm standing up to do this because I want to keep my energy high, but I'm also taking into account the fact that I need to stick to a certain time, that the Wi-Fi is being used, that I've got a kid that's meant to be doing online learning at home because we're in Wales. So all of that is in my awareness. Okay, so then we've got effective relating to others. So this is where we've built good social relationships. We're kind of getting on with people, but then we've got the ineffective where it's like not working. And then the question is always why? What am I not taking into account about myself? Am I being a bit offish? Have I, hidden away in the corner? Do I leave early? Am I a bit critical, judgmental? Do I go onto the drama triangle? But also taking into account what's going on for them. Well, you know, they might have stuff going on. And again, self-expression. So in what way are you effectively expressing yourself? And ineffective is often where we might go into, oh, but I've gone into whiny victim mode and I'm telling everyone how, you know, awful it is. But it is kind of not changing anything because I'm in victim and I've made myself powerless. So what you might want to do here is, again, just press pause. You might want to copy this down or screenshot or something. And then just think about, okay, you know, if you were to give yourself a mark out of 10 for each of these 8 boxes, then do. And the accounting one, I think, is interesting because it's kind of so hard to give it a mark out of 10, but it's just something to be curious about. How good are you at being at the moment and taking everything into account? So if you want to press pause and just remember, there's no judgment in this, it's just curious. You might find that actually you get a 10 out of 10 for effective guiding and directing, or an 8 out of 10, or on a really bad day it might be 4 out of 10. So you might want to take a bad day and a good day and compare the two. So I'm going to leave that with you. Press pause. Okay, and then this is the full model. And it's interesting for me, the words used. So let's just hit. So dominating is negative control because it's bossy, fault finding, punitive. So that links back to the persecutor role. It links back to the I'm okay, you're not okay life position. And so we don't want to be that kind of teacher, because we know, now that we know about the drama triangle, it's just going to set people off in a bad way. Okay. Whereas we do want to be structured. We want to be well organized, lesson plans, marking, seating plans, IT. We want to be firm. So if we've said it, it's got to be followed through. But look at the inspiring word there. And I know we can't, God knows, we can't be inspiring all the time. But that's kind of, it's in there too, because we remember people follow us if we're inspiring. So we don't have to dominate them because they want to follow us. And then on the other side, the looking after people, marshmallowing. So marshmallowing is where I love this word, because if you think about marshmallows, they're really sickly sweet and squishy and they're not very good for you. And that's kind of what this is. This might be the parent that you phone up to say, you know, Matilda has been awful for the 13th time this week. And the mum or dad goes, oh, but she's lovely and you just don't understand. And you know, no, we don't really put boundaries in because we like free expression. Now that might be marshmallowing. There's anyone that's read Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, I think it's Violet Beauregard that is the spoilt brat that wants ponies and then she wants the squirrels, and you know, she gets her comeuppance. So that her parents are marshmallowing, where she's had no boundaries and she just gets everything that she wants. So we don't want to be like that. So there might be the kid who can wind you around their little finger. That means that you become inconsistent and overindulging. So watch out for that. But obviously what we do want is to be accepting, understanding, compassionate. Okay. Now back to accounting. So we're going to be alert, aware, rational, evaluative, assessing inner and outer and current reality. So, and this is why inner and outer is, how am I feeling today? Oh, I've got my period. You know, I'm really tired. I didn't sleep very well. I'm recovering from COVID, so I'm still tired. What do I need? That's the inner accounting. Outer accounting might be, you know, the class, your colleagues, the school, but it might also be whole world. So what's going on in the whole world? Well, it's the end of November, it's December, people are tired. I'll take into that, you know, I'll take that into account. The fact that you know, in the middle of a pandemic, that you might be worried about job security, all of that, and it needs taking into account. Okay, down the bottom we've got relating to others. So what we're wanting is the positive behaviors, so being able to be cooperative, friendly, assertive. So if assertive, remember, is not just rolling over and going, yeah, I'll do whatever you want. This is what I need, and considerate. And what we don't want is submissive, which is the rolling over thing, or rebellious, the whole kind of, no, I'm not going to do that, or yes, 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 yes. In that classic student teacher behavior is, yes, I'll say yes to everything, yes, 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 and then we burn out or we get tired. So that's not good either. Okay, so being assertive is actually you know, at the moment, this is happening for me. You're asking me to take on something extra. I'm not sure how this will fit. What would you like me to drop? Is assertive. Okay, spontaneous. So this is our free self-expression. You know, we want to be creative, fun, zestful, expressive. We want to be able to have a laugh, but we do not want to be kind of reckless and immature. This is I remember I was listening to a podcast and someone was saying how on a works party they thought it was a really good idea at the start of their career to you know, snog the boss. Well, now that's immature, reckless. And not great for career moves. So these are the sort of things. So it's really a model to think about how you know, which of these you do. So I've put together, you know, I'm inviting you to think about how much time you spend doing those things. Now, in terms of how much time where, you could do it in a particular class and think about, with a particular class, how much time do you spend dominating, marshmallowing, being compliant or sulky? You know, how much time are you immature and petulant and tantrumy, and how much time? So you might want to do that for a particular class. You might want to do it for you as a teacher, or you might actually want to apply it to, you know, family Christmas. So I'll leave that with you. If you want to just rewind, you can have another look at that. I'll leave that up. So again, an opportunity to press pause. Okay. So once you've done that and you've got your own picture, of course, the question then always, because we're transactional analysis, we can think and we can change, is what would I like that to look like, and what do I need to do to make it different? Okay, so very often I'm going to use Christmas as an example, although obviously this Christmas might be different. Very often, because we're going back to our childhood homes and our childhood families, we revert to an earlier version of ourselves, which might be very compliant, where you suddenly, you know, they're talking politics, and even though you don't agree, you just go along with it. Or, you know, the jokes might be not jokes that you would normally laugh at, but you laugh at them. So you might become really compliant. Now, if you do, that might be, you might be taking into account everything that's going on, and you might be choosing to comply. That's okay, because you accounted and you chose. But if you find yourself just being horribly compliant and you don't want to be, then this is your chance to go, okay, so how am I going to do that differently? How am I going to take into account what I need? How am I going to take into account what I feel, what I want? And it may be simple things like, well, I don't go for the whole day, or yeah, I'll offer to do the washing up when they start talking about politics. But it's that thing about, if we think about it, then it gives us a chance to make choices and to do things differently. Okay, so if you need to press pause and do that, then great. Okay, we're into the final section. So there's Mr. Byrne himself, Eric Byrne. And here, so this, I teach this with kids. I don't use this word because, as you can see, if you work with teenagers, it's just way too smutty. But I'm going to assume that you can smirk, but he talks about strokes as units of attention that we need for survival. Now, in psychology, when we're teaching psychology, we look at the Romanian orphanages, which were under Ceausescu's regime, and they were like baby factories. So there were so many orphans, they had children in cots, lying kind of foot to foot, head at either end, and there would be hundreds in a big room. And because there were so few staff, there was so little money, you know, it wasn't ill-intentioned on the staff's point of view. They would feed both babies kind of bottle in each hand and just hold the bottles in the baby's mouth. And then they'd kind of change the babies, change their nappies by rote. And so these children were not getting individual attention, and they weren't actually physically being held or stroked, which is where this word came from. So Byrne said that as children, if we're not held, we're going to die, aren't we? If you think about a baby in a hunter-gatherer society that isn't picked up, isn't held, then it's going to die in any society. So it starts off that we experience attention by being held and by being physically stroked, ideally in a kind and loving way. Now, what happened in the Romanian orphanages is, although the children had their physical needs met, they didn't have their attention and emotional needs, they weren't stroked. And so some failed to thrive and many died. So it is absolutely a survival need. So if you think about what it's like, I don't know if you, we're not going to go into this deeply, so, but you might have had the experience as a child in school or at home where you didn't get attention, where maybe there was somebody in your family who was ill, or another baby came along and you lose attention, and it's the most exquisitely painful thing to happen. So it always makes me smile when people say, oh, you know, they're only self-harming because they're attention seeking, and you just think, well, yeah. And we all need attention, and if we don't get attention in positive, healthy ways, we will do whatever it takes to get attention, because any kind of attention is better than no attention at all. Okay, because if we're not attended to, we're social species, we don't thrive. So we know at the moment with the pandemic, particularly the elderly population, you know, that we haven't, they may not have seen people face to face at all, so they're not getting attention. But the biggest thing that I keep hearing on the various platforms and things that I read is that people are missing hugs. People are missing hugs, particularly people who live alone, because where are they going to get their hugs from? You know, if they have a hug, they're risking COVID, and that really is having an impact on physical and mental health. And there's all sorts of research. The Byrne didn't know this then, but what the neurobiology and neuropsychology shows now is that when you're hugged, 7 seconds is good. Apparently the best length hug is 11 seconds. So if you hug someone for 11 seconds, then it starts to release serotonin and oxytocin in both of you. And why those neurotransmitters are brilliant is they counteract cortisol and adrenaline and noradrenaline, norepinephrine, which are your stress hormones. So actually hugs not only are kind of nice social things, they're fundamental to our health and well-being. Now Byrne didn't know that bit because we didn't have the science back then, but he's been proved to be right. So strokes come in different forms. So conditional for what we do, we tend to dish a lot of these out at school. So well done, you put a date on that, or that looks tidy, or you got an A grade for that. They're all conditional because they're about what we do. And even as staff, you know, it's that we get our performance review based on our exam data. So that's conditional, that it's positive if we do. But the sorts of strokes that have the best impact, that feel the nicest for us, are just the ones that we kind of get for who we are. So obviously pictures of hugs here. But this is a teacher, you know, it wouldn't be appropriate in any circumstance to hug a secondary school child, maybe teeny tiny primary ones, you know, again, child protection if you've got somebody around. But if you're standing at the door when your class come in as a secondary school teacher, and you remember their name, you remember that they're interested in football, you remember that their rabbit just died, and you kind of ask how they are, and you're really, really interested, then that's interested in who they are. That's unconditional. Okay, that's non-conditional, and that's what we like. Now, if we don't get those, ideally we want this one. If we don't get this one, we'll get these. Now, this is sometimes where you get perfectionism, hyper performers, where they don't get attention for who they are. They only get attention for what they do. So of course it can mean that you're constantly achieving, because unless you're achieving, no one's interested. So although this sounds nice, it can be toxic. So for me, I kind of, when I work with groups of kids, this group tend to be really uber hardworking girls who around year 10 and upwards start to get anxiety, which is linked into perfectionism. So all of these are think about how you're using it. And this one's just a lovely one. Now, if we don't get positive attention, if a kid grows up where no one is ever pleased to see them, no one ever just smiles at them, and they might even have the opposite where it's like, oh, I wish you'd never been born, you're just a pain, you're useless, those kinds of statements. And if they're never getting praised for tidying their bedroom, then they're going to be used to a diet of negatives. Okay, and if you're used to a diet of negatives, then you don't even really expect the positives. And so the negatives, again, can be conditional and unconditional. So a conditional negative could be, God, you're thick because you failed that test. So it's incumbent upon what you did, or it might be, oh, you're the slowest one in the class, or nobody fancies you because you didn't sing very well in the talent competition or something. So it's incumbent on what you did. So that hurts if somebody thinks your picture is rubbish, or your performance was rubbish, or you didn't run very fast in a race. That really hurts, but it doesn't hurt anywhere near as much as someone saying, I hate you, you're stupid, nobody likes you, nobody loves you, I wish you'd never been born. Because it's so part of who we are. How do we change that? We're kind of stuck with that sense of we're not good enough. And so a lot of if you go back to the windows on the world and you think about the kids who are in the negative, often these will be kids who've been brought up on a diet of negative strokes, where they're always told that they're not good enough, that they're not wanted. So it's very hard then to move them. And often the children who were in the positive a lot are the ones who were grown up with lots of positive unconditional strokes, just being pleased to be here. Okay, so you can start to see hopefully how all this theory links together. Now, there's also this thing called the stroke economy, which again, if you do it with teenagers and use this language, if I'm teaching this to kids, so one of the things I want to say to you is transactional analysis works brilliantly with kids. They get it, they like the pictures. All these exercises that I'm doing with you could do with them. And the drama triangle in particular, they really get. And I have taught this, I tend to talk about units of attention rather than strokes. And you'll see why as I read through this. So don't give strokes when you have them to give. So that's we don't want to make her big-headed. So we won't tell her she's done that well, or we won't tell her she looks good, or we won't tell him he was really kind then, or we won't tell him that he was really generous. Even though we saw it and we experienced it, we're not going to say that, because it usually comes from we don't want them to be better than us, and we don't want to be vulnerable. Okay, so that's that one. Don't ask for strokes when you need them. So and this is so culturally normative, I think, that we don't say do you think I'm pretty? Do you did you enjoy listening to me playing the piano? Or could you give me, what was it that you liked about that lesson? So we don't ask for strokes. So we don't ask for the kind of strokes. So you're all doing lesson observations, and what you're all hearing really loudly is all the things you did well. And we might be desperate for them to tell us all the things we did. We listen to the things we didn't do so well, and we might really want to hear some of the things that we did do well, but we don't ask. We don't say to our mentors, I really hear that I've got to improve on these things. Now, can you tell me what you enjoyed about the lesson? Because it makes us feel vulnerable. Don't accept strokes if you want them. So this is when someone gives you a compliment, go, oh, you look really nice today, which actually you really want, but you go, oh no, I don't, because I haven't washed my hair. Or that was a really good mark you got in that essay, and you say, oh well, it could have been better. So even though you secretly want that stroke, you kind of don't allow yourself to hear it. Don't reject strokes if you don't want them. So we don't, just because this is the classic building site whistle situation. Sorry, this is gendered, isn't it? Because I'm female. But that thing in the days when I was younger, that thing where you walk past and someone wolf whistles, and that they might intend that as a stroke of attention, positive, but you're allowed to reject it. You're allowed to say, don't do that. I don't like it. I don't want it. Or again, if somebody says, oh, I love your piano playing, you might say, can we talk about my essay? So you don't have to accept strokes. And then this is a big one, don't stroke yourself. And that's why you can't use that sentence with teenagers. Don't stroke yourself. This is where you can't notice. We have a belief. These are all false beliefs about that we can't say, I'm good at this, or I did that well, because it's kind of big-headed. Or the other belief is, if I say, oh, that was a great lesson, I'm really proud of myself, that we sometimes think that we'll kind of jinx it and then we'll never teach a good lesson again. Or we'll have that sense of, oh, but I'll never be able to live up to that again. So these are false beliefs. So I just, again, press pause and think about which of these false beliefs do you hold? Now, this matters before you press pause. This matters because the way that we are about how we are with attention is often then how we deal with other people. There's often a link. So, for example, that top one about, if you were brought up in a family where no one ever said, oh, that was good, or well done, or hey, it's nice to see you, then it may just be that even if you think those things, you don't say it enough. And so it's kind of thinking in two ways when you press pause in a minute. It's thinking about, how was this for me when I was growing up, and how is this for me now? And then your next question is to kind of go through it again and think about, well, how is that when I'm working with children and young people? Okay, so press pause. Okay, now this, I'm going to leave. You can come back to this if you want to do it. So again, press pause if you want to do it. This is Jim McKellar's stroking profile, which again always makes me smile. But it's it's another model that you can copy down, and you can rank order and think about what you giving, taking, returning. And you can see down the left-hand side that you've got the ranking, almost, never, seldom. And it's just so you become aware. All of it is awareness, because if you can think about it, you can change it. And the idea is that it might be that you're brilliant at giving positive strokes, but you're really bad at taking it. So you might be really good at complimenting other people, but you're really bad at receiving compliments, that you're the person that sort of shrugs it off. And one of the ways that I kind of someone once taught me about that was that when somebody gives you a compliment, it's like somebody giving you a present. And if you push it away, then that they've gone to the effort of buying you a present, and it's a bit ungrateful of you. So it's just learning to gracefully say thank you. So if you fancy having a go at that, press pause. So you can see that transactional analysis kind of has some things and models that are really useful for you as a person, you as a teacher, you as a team, and you and your organization. So I'm curious, and this is where we can talk in the chat, if you want to put this in here. What do you want to try out? What do you want to know more about? But the big thing is, what have you thought about, and what has that led you to think about changing? And you can do it at all four of those levels: person, teacher, team person, or organization, or you might want to do it just on one or two of those. Okay. So the reason that it's got the fourth bullet point about what you're going to actually do to make that difference, so it might be a really practical thing, but time frame is also important, so that and that's like a SMART target, isn't it? So you know when you've done it and you can tick it off. So I hope that all makes sense, and that you get it. There's loads. If you like it and you want to know more, have a look at that book. Obviously you can come back to me and ask me questions, but it's been nice to be here, and see you. Have a good, look after yourselves and be safe. Okay.